I was halfway down the steps when she leaned on the horn, ordering my son to drag his bike aside so her Tesla could cut across our driveway like it was city property. This wasn't a neighbor making a U-turn. Our HOA president had turned my concrete into her personal toll lane. What she didn't know was that the engineer she kept trespassing on had already filed the permit and ordered 2 tons of boulders spaced 18 inches apart, perfect for feet, impossible for tires. Let me take you back to where that decision started. Aurora wears dawn like a polite apology, thin light on the roofs, a little chill still clinging to the grass. I'm halfway down the front steps when a horn snaps the morning in two. Linda, our HOA president, nudges her Tesla off the street and straight across my driveway like she's merging onto a freeway. Jacob moved the bike, she calls through the open window, the syllables crisp as a memo. I'm late. Jacob freezes beside his skateboard ramp. This is our sidewalk safety, she says, nudging the Tesla forward another foot. Let me through. I step off the last stair. Linda used the street. She lifts 2 fingers in a wave, the kind I've seen directors give extras. I am. It's community access. Don't make a thing of it, Graham. The horn taps again. Jacob drags his bike toward the grass, the front wheel jittering. Birds scatter from the pine, and the Tesla coasts over the concrete apron tires, humming where birdsong ought to be. The car's shadow slides over my shoes, then she's gone, making the tight right back to the main road. Eleanor crosses her arms on the porch rail. Did that just happen? It did, I say. My voice sounds like it belongs to a neighbor who should have spoken up years ago. I look down at the driveway's expansion joints, little seams I know by heart, remembering how concrete fails when loads repeat in the same place. It doesn't crack the first time. It remembers. Jacob tows the bike back. Is she allowed to do that? No, I say, but the word lands soft. Inside, the house smells like coffee and wet grass tracked in on Jacob's sneakers. I put my lunch in the fridge, wipe the heel marks from the tile, and tell myself to let it go. At 11, a chime from my phone, subject community, easement, clarification, from Linda's HOA address. Eleanor leans over my shoulder while I open it. That was fast, she whispers. Graham, the email begins as community president. I've consulted our covenants and want to clarify emergency easement rights. Because your driveway connects to community property, it functions as a shared access point in high-traffic conditions. I blink. No, it doesn't. Jacob peeks at the screen. What's an easement? Something you either have recorded or you don't, I say. Eleanor squeezes my forearm. Reply later. Eat something, I reply now. Hi, Linda. Please point me to the recorded easement in our deed or the county map. As far as I know, this driveway is private property. Her response arrives faster than toast. Let's keep this neighborly. The board supports temporary use during peak hours. Thanks for understanding. Neighborly, I say, mostly to my mug. That evening, dinner is spaghetti and the hum of the dishwasher. Jacob swings his phone between fingers. Dad, does she own our driveway? I say, again firmer. We do. Eleanor tilts her head. Then, show him, show us. We carry plates to the sink. I go to the hall closet where the important things live, the folder with the county seal, our insurance binder, the envelope of handprints Jacob and Anna made when the concrete first set. I bring the folder to the table. The paper smells like thyme and staplers. Jacob sits forward. Is this what you used to do? Not this exactly, I say. Bridges mostly, but everything with wheels follows rules. Even Linda, he says. Especially Linda. The porch light clicks on. Outside, a couple walking a corgi slows at the edge of our lawn. The woman cups her hand and calls, Sorry about the morning, our HOA. Karen thinks every driveway is a public lane. Eleanor gives me a look. Did you hear that? I nod. Pretending not to smile and take the folder back inside. I lay the HOA bylaws next to our warranty deed. The bylaws are slick and cheerful. The deed is yellowing and stubborn. I read aloud to Jacob because it steadies me. Article 7. Common areas shall mean the private property owned by the association. And lots shall mean separately platted residential parcels. I hold up the deed. This is our lot. Where's the part about emergency easement? Jacob asks. I flip one page, another, until the county stamp shows. There isn't one. If there were, it would be recorded here. I tap the box where legal descriptions live. No easement in favor of the association across our driveway. None. Then she's just making it up or confusing common sense with common area. I try to make it a joke. It doesn't quite land. The day folds into evening. I take the trash out. A minivan noses halfway up the apron, then reverses when I keep walking. The driver raises both palms, sorry. The little courtesy clears a space in my chest I didn't know I was holding tight. Back in the kitchen, I draft a reply, careful and clean. Linda, per Article 7, and our deed. Our driveway is not a common area. Please refrain from using it as a thoroughfare. Happy to discuss at the next meeting. Too soft, Eleanor asks. Soft is fine, I say. Soft leaves a record. At 8, the group chat pings. Anyone know why Linda's been cutting through the Whitfords? A reply. She said it's allowed for emergencies. Another. Was my commute? An emergency LOL. Another. If it's allowed, why is there no sign? The thread turns prickly. Jacob's thumbs hover over the keyboard. Don't feed it, I tell him. We'll handle it by paper. The doorbell rings, 2 polite taps. Mrs. Alvarez from 3 doors down stands on the porch, cardigan wrapped tight. I don't want trouble, she says, voice low. But this morning she waved me to follow like it was a detour. I turned around. It didn't feel right. Thank you, Eleanor says. Mrs. Alvarez leans in a fraction. She said the board approved it. Is that true? I shake my head. There's no easement on our deed. She exhales thin and quick. I just wanted to say sorry. She glances past us at the driveway as if it might answer back and retreats. When the house is quiet, I take the bylaws to the dining table. The overhead bulb is a little too bright. It makes the paper glow, and my eyes ache. I read each section like I'm back in an inspection pencil tapping a rhythm. My breath fogs the glass of water by my elbow. Somewhere outside the gate on Linda's side yard gives a hollow clack in the wind. I read aloud again for the room for the record. No easement. No temporary designation of private driveways as common access. Owners shall keep driveways clear of obstructions. That's maintenance, not surrender. 2 quoted lines are plenty. The rest I let sit between us. Eleanor brings a folded blanket, sets it on the chair back. You're shaking, she says gently. It's cold, I lie. My hands are steady enough. It's the air inside them that trembles. Jacob pads in from the hallway. Dad, yeah, buddy. If the rules are on our side, what do we do next? We make them visible. I press the bylaws flat, then slide them back into the folder beside the warranty deed. My fingertips catch on the raised county seal. There's comfort in embossing. It announces that somewhere a clerk hammered this into being. Jacob watches. You going to email her again? First thing I say, and then we'll bring it to the meeting. By the book. He nods like he's trying on patience for size. Okay. The fridge hums. The porch light clicks off on its timer. In the quiet, the house feels like its own document wall signed by years of dinner's floors initialed by muddy shoes. I carry the folder to the hall closet, then stop short. The old banker's box with our property papers sits on the top shelf, bank envelope tucked beside it. I take the envelope down the paper, rasping against the cardboard flap, and set it on the entry table. My thumbs work the lid free. The certified copy of our deed rests inside with the plat map, the inked parcel lines as crisp as a nurse's part. I lift the deed by the corners to keep my oils off the seal. My hands are steady now, but there's a flutter in my chest like a bird who has found the window. Tomorrow, I say to no one, and to the whole house at once. Tomorrow, we start with paper. And I open the old deed folder, the certificate ribbon cool against my wrist, preparing to read it like a pledge. The morning air has that metallic bite only February seems to carry in Aurora, your breath visible car exhaust hanging low over the cul-de-sac. Jacob stood near the end of the driveway phone up, filming with a kind of glee I hadn't seen since he'd unwrapped his first camera. Dad, look, he whispered, holding the screen toward me. Linda leaned out of her Tesla palm open, and a man in a gray sedan leaned over to slap a $5 bill into it. She smiled like she was running valet at a country club, then motioned him across our concrete. My throat went dry. She's charging for this. Jacob grinned, too excited to realize the weight. Got it all. Look. The video played back, crisp, shaky at the edges, but clear. Linda's manicured nails pinched the bill, her Tesla blocking the street like a booth. A second car slowed, then followed. Unbelievable, I muttered. By 8:30, more cars were stacked along the curb exhaust, merging into a fog that clung to the pine branches. Linda waved them through with the confidence of a traffic cop, Tesla idling at the apron of our drive. Mrs. Alvarez shuffled by with her terrier clutching the leash tighter than usual. This feels wrong, she murmured, eyes on the ground. Feels illegal, I corrected, but she kept walking. That evening, the group chat pinged nonstop. Jacob had uploaded the clip. Within minutes, replies flared. She actually took your money. Wait, is this allowed? Looks like a shortcut. LOL. Eleanor read over my shoulder, lips pressed. Some people think it's funny. Yeah, I said, until they're the driveway. Another ping. Linda says the board approved it. Emergency easement. Chill. I pushed away from the table. That's enough. By the time I reached the street, Linda was already there. Tesla parked sideways at the curb, hazard lights blinking. Another neighbor handed her cash with a sheepish smile. Linda, I called. She turned the HOA badge glinting on her lanyard. Oh, Graham. Community easement, remember. This is perfectly fine. No, it isn't. She tilted her head voice like sugar on glass. Don't be difficult. I'm providing relief during rush hour. People appreciate efficiency. On my property. She laughed softly. Don't be territorial. It's just concrete. Jacob edged closer, phone still rolling. Want me to post live? Not now, I said through clenched teeth. Linda patted the Tesla's hood like it was a faithful pet. This neighborhood needs leaders willing to be flexible. You should thank me for easing congestion. Flexible doesn't mean trespassing. She smiled wider. We'll see what the bylaws say. Cars kept pulling up. A minivan, a pickup, 2 sedans. Some drivers waved dollar bills like it was a parade. The stench of exhaust thickened until it coated my tongue. One man leaned out his window. Worth every penny. Saves 10 minutes. Paying her doesn't make it legal, I snapped. Linda raised her palm toward him. Ignore Graham. He's sensitive. Jacob muttered. Dad, she's turning this into a carnival. She's turning it into theft, I corrected. The Tesla shifted forward until its nose hovered over the driveway, blocking the entrance entirely. Linda motioned at the line of cars, waving them like traffic police at a construction site. Go on through, she called. Community approved. Engines roared one by one over the concrete I'd poured my savings into 15 years earlier. Each set of tires felt like a boot to the chest. Neighbors watched from porches, some amused, some embarrassed. A few even clapped. I stood at the gate, jaw-tight fists shoved deep in my jacket pockets so they wouldn't tremble. Linda leaned out, voice smooth. See? Everyone's happy. Everyone I asked. Or just you. Her smirk was answer enough. The Tesla idled, humming steady at the edge of my lawn. The blue glow of its dash reflected in her eyes, and the smell of exhaust wrapped around me like a dare. Jacob nudged me. Dad. What are you gonna do? I watched Linda wave another car across her hand, cutting the air in a practiced arc. My heart thudded with something sharper than anger. If she wants a road, I muttered, barely loud enough for him, I'll give her one she'll never forget. The diner, off Colfax, keeps its lights a shade too bright, the kind that makes the chrome napkin holders glare back at you. Bacon grease hangs in the air and the toast is already past brown. Arthur sits across from me, elbows on Formica, his glasses low on his nose. You'll never beat her with anger, he says, leaning over the coffee like it's a witness. Beat her with paper. I wrap both hands around my cup. I've got paper. Bylaws, deed, emails. You've got pieces, he says. What you need is a record. Notices sent. Permits obtained. A design that passes inspection and makes her look like she tried to shut down art. Art, I repeat, and it tastes odd, like sugar on a blueprint. Arthur smiles. Something beautiful that just happens to be impassable. I pull a pen from my shirt pocket and slide a stack of napkins toward me. Lines come easier than sleep, a curve here, a crescent of river rock. They're larger boulders staggered like punctuation. If I place them with 18-inch gaps people can walk through, I say sketching. But tires won't track. He nods. That's the idea. If the board argues safety, you're ready. Emergency access. Show clear-foot access. Vehicle passage. Not required across private property. You think they'll call a hearing? They'll have to, he sips. And that's good. Hearings mean transcripts. Transcripts mean sunlight. Eleanor slides into the booth beside me, cheeks pink from the heat. I ordered you a plate, she says. Don't draw the toast. Arthur grins. Eleanor, he's drafting with butter knives in his head. She looks from my napkin maze to Arthur. Is this going to escalate things? It'll formalize them, Arthur says. And it'll be legal. Legal's good, she says, though. Her hand finds my knee under the table and squeezes. I sketch another path, this one flaring toward the mailbox. What about permits, landscaping? Arthur says, you'll need a simple permit for decorative boulders if they exceed certain weights. Call the city. File the form. Stamp the receipt. Email a copy to the HOA board with a polite FYI compliance with municipal code. FYI, Like a velvet hammer, I say. He stirs his coffee. You were a civil engineer? You know how to make heavy things look graceful. Do that, but document every step. The waitress arrives with our plates eggs glossed with grease toast that crunches like gravel. I slide my napkin stack beside the ketchup bottle and try to see the design from the street, not a blockade of garden, not angry intentional. Okay, I say. I'll call a supplier. Don't call. Arthur says, go in person. Ask questions like you're buying a sculpture. And then, he taps the table with his index finger. Write on the order exactly what you need. Eleanor sets her fork down. Exactly. Exactly, he says. Write it in permanent ink. I hear my own voice before I know I'm speaking. 2 tons. Arthur lifts his brows. Say it the way they'll remember it. 2 tons of boulders. I say, feeling the weight of each word, stamped on the invoice. That's your headline, Arthur says, not blocked road. Award-winning landscape. Eleanor's smile is small but real. Only award I want is nobody honks at Jacob. Trust me, Arthur says. Make it pretty. Make it pass inspection. Make it so nobody can argue it's anything less than what it is your yard. I push my plate away and pull out my phone. There's a yardstone place on Havana, I say. Says they stock basalt and granite. Basalt's dark, Arthur says. Granite gives you contrast. Mix sizes. Variation looks natural. I type notes as if the phone might testify later. Basalt plus granite mixed sizes. 18-inch spacing. Permit before delivery. Email HOA with receipt. He watches me type. Good. Now, hearings. Go on, I say. HOA hearings are theater, he says. They read, notice of violation. You respond. Don't argue on the sidewalk. Respond in writing. Bring 1 physical copy in a folder you can tap. Bring 1 on a thumb drive in case they want a projector. A projector, I say, as if we're pitching a film. You show the deed with no easement, the city permit, the design sketch, and if you're lucky, 3 emails where Linda used the word easement wrong. Eleanor touches my arm. We have at least 2. We'll get 3, I say. Arthur's smile fades into something like a benediction. Quiet wins Graham. Quiet and undeniable. The Yardstone office smells like dust and hose water. Outside, forklifts cough and pivot. I run my palms across a slab of granite and feel the cool pull of shade. The clerk, a guy with sunburned forearms and a pencil behind his ear, looks up from a clipboard. Looking for something decorative, he asks. Functional, I say. Decorative is a bonus. He laughs. How much rock? I glance at my notes, then meet his eyes. 2 tons of boulders, mixed sizes 2 to 4 feet. Delivery next Tuesday if you've got a window. He whistles low. You building a fortress? A garden, I say, and the word surprises me with how right it feels. He flips forms toward me. Sign, here, here, and here. Delivery charge includes placement in the front yard. You got a permit? Filing today, I say. City code for decorative stone. Good man. He stamps the receipt, clack, clack, and slides it across. The ink is damp and smells like a new promise. Outside, I hold the paper up to the sun. The words, delivery. Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. Sit dead center like a verdict. At City Hall, the permit desk clerk wears a cardigan even though it's 80 degrees. I hand over the form. My hands smell faintly of drafting graphite I can't ever seem to wash away. Decorative boulders, she reads. Any structures? Just placement. 18-inch walk-through spacing. Emergency access. Clear on foot, I say. And it's private property. She nods, runs a highlighter over a line. Permit fee is $60. Another stamp lands and the receipt curls as it dries. I snap a photo of the permit and email it to the HOA board with a subject line that feels like a polite drumbeat, FYI permit approved. Decorative Boulders front yard. Within minutes, an auto reply from the HOA inbox received. Arthur texts a single word. Papered. Back home, the kitchen table becomes a drafting board. Napkins give way to graph paper. I tape 2 sheets together and trace the driveway outline, then start placing circles large, medium, small, 18 inches between everywhere. I imagine Jacob walking the path to the mailbox, Eleanor carrying groceries between granite shoulders, me rolling the trash bin out with a gentle turn. I imagine Linda's Tesla nose and where it would stop. Eleanor sets a glass of water by my elbow. Deliveries Tuesday, 10 a.m., I say. She studies the drawing. It's pretty, that's the point, and legal, stamped and paid. She exhales, relief easing her shoulders. Then, finish it. I take a soft pencil and darken the gaps until they look like the braid of a river one that lets feet pass and tells wheels no. The graphite smudges my fingertips and I don't wipe it away. It feels like I'm putting the ground back in my hands. When I'm done, I trace one last line, the 18-inch corridors consistent measured. Perfect for feet, I say, more to the drawing than to her impossible for tires, and I set the pencil down like a gavel. The notice was the color of a stop sign and twice as loud. It arrived, rolled like a threat in my mailbox, stamped in red. Community hazard. Remove stones immediately. The paper crackled when I uncoiled it, leaving a faint pink dust on my fingertips like someone had sanded a warning down to fit in my hand. Eleanor read over my shoulder. Hazard. To whom? To the story. Linda's telling. I said, though my mouth was dry. The kitchen smelled of coffee gone cold. Outside, a pair of kids zigzagged along the sidewalk, their laughter cutting off when they reached our driveway. They stepped into the street to go around. By afternoon, an email from the HOA listserv hit my inbox. Subject: emergency, access, and community safety. The body was a collection of phrases that sounded official until you lined them up next to the deed and the city code. Obstruction, emergency vehicles, community responsibility. No citation, just alarm. Jacob hovered in the doorway. They're saying the rocks could block an ambulance. An ambulance can park on a street, I said too sharply. I rubbed my eyes. Foot access is clear. The permit says so. He nodded, but the knot between his eyebrows stayed. People in the chat are piling on. Don't answer, I said. Paper beats thread. I stepped into the garage to breathe where the air smelled like rubber and warm plywood. The door to the driveway rattled slightly in a breeze. The new boulders sat in their places like punctuation marks, the gaps even and careful. I had measured those corridors with a tape and a patience I hadn't used since my bridge days. 18 inches everywhere. Perfect for feet, I had said. Impossible for tires. The phrase felt less like a boast now and more like a prayer. At dusk, a second notice appeared, this one pinned to the garage door with bright blue painter's tape. Notice of violation. Sat in all caps above a paragraph that described my front yard like a villain. I ran a finger along the tape's edge. Adhesive tugged at my skin, clean and petty. Eleanor stood behind me. They taped it to the door. Painter's tape, I said, because naming a thing was easier than admitting it had been done to us. From across the street, Mrs. Alvarez emerged with a bag of groceries and seeing me cross to the far sidewalk. I raised a hand. She lifted her bag higher and kept walking, eyes on the asphalt. The distance felt larger than the width of the road. The clubhouse smelled faintly of chlorine from the pool, a sweetness that never belonged to any plant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, turning faces a little sallow and paper a little too white. Folding chairs scraped. The board sat behind a plastic table, dressed in a cloth that didn't quite reach the floor. Linda was already at the front, posture perfect, HOA badge winking under the lights. "Let's begin," the chairperson said, tapping a pen against a legal pad. I took a seat in the second row where I could feel the air vent's unkind draft. Arthur slid into a seat by the back wall, 2 fingers raised in hello, a steadying metronome. Linda smiled for the room. "We're here because Mr. Whitford has installed large stones that obstruct emergency access and create a hazard." I kept my folder flat on my lap, palm across it to keep from tapping. "I have a permit from the city," I said, my voice a little too even, "and the design allows foot traffic throughout. We'll allow statements when recognized," the chairperson said. Their tone aimed at balance but hit the side of apology. A few neighbors nodded along with the cadence of procedure. A man from 2 streets over raised his hand. "I saw kids climbing those rocks. Looks dangerous." "Kids climb everything," someone else muttered, then went quiet when Linda cut a look in their direction. Eleanor shifted beside me, the toe of her shoe bouncing lightly against the carpet. I watched her stop it with a breath. The hum of the lights pressed on. Linda clicked a remote. My boulders appeared on a projected slide, captured from an angle that made the gaps look narrower than they were. "As you can see," she said, "these impediments could slow responders." She paused for effect. "In an emergency, seconds matter." Her words fell into the room like coins into a jar everyone was trying not to look at. A few heads tilted toward me. The projector fan whirred hot and small. "May I respond?" I asked. The chairperson glanced at Linda. She performed a gracious nod. Briefly. I stood folder in both hands so I couldn't lose them. City Hall issued a permit for decorative boulders. The spacing meets foot access. There is no recorded easement over our driveway. Emergency vehicles are not required to drive onto a private driveway to render aid. Parking on a public street is the norm. I kept it to one breath, 2 sentences that wouldn't be called a lecture. Linda leaned into the microphone. He's quoting selectively. "Cite me," I said a little too fast. Arthur shook his head once small, a reminder to stay quiet and undeniable. I closed my mouth and sat. The chairperson shuffled papers that did not look like my permit. We've also received several emails expressing concern. A woman in the 3rd row turned to whisper to her husband. His eyes slid away from mine when he noticed me watching. The whispers felt like drafts through a door that wouldn't seal. During the break, I stood by the water cooler, the cones of paper cups stacked like tiny white hats. Mrs. Alvarez approached, hands clasped. "Graham," she said, Her eyes flicked toward Linda, then back to me. "I got the email. It sounded scary. It's supposed to—" I said and hated how tired I sounded. "I didn't write in," she added quickly. My sister uses a cane. When she visits, I'll walk her to the door," I said. "The gaps are wide enough." Her mouth softened. "Okay." She squeezed my arm and stepped away as Linda approached, perfume bright as a bell. "Graham," Linda said, tone honeyed. "You could have avoided all this by asking permission." "For my yard?" I asked. "For the community's peace," she said. "You escalated. I thought of painter's tape on my garage. I documented." She smiled. "You'll be forced to remove every last stone." The words were delivered like a dessert set down with care and expectation. For a heartbeat, I imagined the forklift reversing into my front yard, the garden reduced to an invoice's worth of absence. Something in my chest tilted, then steadied. "Then the record will show what it shows," I said. Her smile didn't move, but something in her eyes did. The meeting resumed colder than it had begun. A board member read from a sheet that did not include my permit. People packed up their bags like they wanted their hands busy if eyes landed on them. As we filed out, I heard my name caught and released in whispers. The hallway to the exit smelled like the pool filter room, metallic damp, not quite air. "Quiet," Arthur said at my shoulder, not touching me. Quiet and undeniable. I nodded, and the nod felt like a brace under a beam. At home, the porch light threw a milky cone across the driveway. A fresh envelope waited on the welcome mat, cream thick enough to make a statement. My name was printed in a neat block hand. I carried it to the dining table where the deed and permit already lay like anchors. Eleanor stood close enough that our sleeves brushed. "Whatever it is, we face it." I slid a finger under the flap. Paper rasped like a match. Inside, a single sheet, heavy, official. The heading was all serif and certainty hearing scheduled. January 2021. The room went very quiet like a courtroom before the first oath. I set the notice next to the permit so they could see each other. "Good," I said, surprising myself. "Now it's on the record." Folding chairs scraped the clubhouse floor like 100 pencils breaking at once. The heater rattled in the vent above us, pushing out air that smelled faintly of dust and pool chlorine. Through the front windows I could see a sliver of my yard 2 blocks away if I leaned just so. It was ridiculous to think I could, but my brain insisted on checking whether the rocks still sat where I'd left them. Outside the clubhouse, someone had parked tight along the curb, and in the distance beyond the manicured hedges, word filtered in Linda's Tesla was wedged between 2 boulders unable to swing the nose around. Arthur slid into the end seat of my row and gave the smallest nod. I answered with my own. Beneath my chair, my leather folder pressed against my shoes like a sleeping dog. Survey map, camera clip on a thumb drive. Permit, copies, printed emails. "Let's come to order," the chairperson said, tapping the table with a capped pen. The board looked tired, the way paper looks tired, edges curled, corners nipped. "We are here to address a complaint regarding decorative stone placement at Lot 17. "Decorative," Linda repeated, leaning into her microphone. Her cheeks were a careful shade of winter pink, her voice a careful kind of concern. "We're talking about an obstruction, a public hazard. Residents have expressed fear that emergency access is compromised." A low murmur moved across the chairs. I kept my hands folded. In my mind, the driveway's 18-inch corridors ran like pathways through a field passable on foot, impossible for tires. The heater clattered again like the guts of an old bridge being asked to hold a little more. Linda clicked a remote. A photograph filled the portable screen behind her, my front yard taken from an angle that flattened depth and pinched every gap. "As you can see," she said, "there's no way a vehicle could enter. During winter, this is especially dangerous. Ice, limited visibility, compromised response time. The chairperson looked down the table. Mr. Whitford, you'll have an opportunity to respond. I nodded once. Keep it quiet. Keep it undeniable. A younger board member cleared her throat. We've received several emails, she said. Concerns about children climbing, concerns about visibility, concerns about congestion. Someone in the back laughed softly. Congestion, as if it were a new neighbor. Linda folded her hands benign. We want what's best for everyone. Arthur breathed out through his nose in the way he did when a witness was warming up for a performance. Mr. Whitford, the chairperson said at last. I stood with the folder and set it on the table like a tool I respected. I have city permits for the stones, I said, keeping my sentence short enough to fit on a sticky note. The design leaves 18-inch footpaths throughout. There is no recorded easement over my driveway. Can you prove that Linda said bright as a ceiling light? Yes, I said, and flipped the folder open. The survey map lay on top, crisp lines tracing property boundaries and right-of-way like veins. I placed it on the table, then held up a copy so the nearest row could see. This is our plat. This line I pointed with a capped pen is the public right-of-way. The driveway is on private property. Maps can be misread, Linda said sweetly. They can, I said, which is why the legend matters. I angled the corner toward the board, the county seal catching the light. No easement recorded across Lot 17. A man 2 rows up craned his neck. Can we see it? The chairperson nodded, and I walked the copy over. Fingers brushed mine, a small exchange of paper and pulse. Thank you, he said quiet. Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Even if he has a permit, the effect is the same. Cars can't pass. This is not a museum. It's a house, I said, and a garden. A couple of neighbors snorted. Someone coughed hard enough to make their program flutter to the floor. Mr. Whitford, the chairperson, said, Do you have any other evidence? The question steadied me. I do. I nodded at Jacob, who had taken a seat by the projector cart with a solemnity that would have made a bailiff proud. He plugged in the thumb drive. On the screen, a paused frame waited Linda leaning out of her window palm, up a sedan's driver, rolling a bill between his fingers. This was recorded last winter, I said, by my son. Is this necessary? Linda asked, but the room had shifted. Curiosity always changes the temperature. I glanced at Arthur. He gave me a once-down nod. Go. Roll it, I told Jacob. The clip began cold light, our cul-de-sac minted in exhaust. Linda's Tesla boxed the apron. A gray sedan eased forward. On screen, her hand made the small crisp motion of a cashier. The bill changed hands. Her fingers pinched it. She motioned him across the concrete as if the air itself obeyed her wrist. From somewhere behind me, a sharp intake of breath. The video cut to a second car, then a third. Someone whispered, "No way." Then a voice near the aisle, barely louder than a thought, she charged us, heads turned like sunflowers tracking a cloud. Linda's face reddened above her scarf. Context matters, she said, chin high. People offered gas money because I was solving a community problem. A few people looked at each other. The heater rattled again, and the light from the screen painted everyone a little blue. The chairperson cleared their throat. Let's keep comments orderly. Orderly would be nice, I said immediately, wishing I hadn't. I put my hand flat on the table so the tendons could learn what flat felt like. I'm presenting only what happened on my property. Arthur's pen tapped once, then stilled. Mini Cliff, he'd call it if life allowed stage directions. The younger board member leaned toward her microphone. Mr. Whitford, can you demonstrate the footpaths? Yes, I said, grateful for the question, and slid a printout of my layout across. 18 inches between stones in 3 parallel corridors measured every 2 feet. We confirmed with the tape and chalk before placement. The city permit office reviewed this diagram. She studied it. I see. Linda gestured toward the window. Meanwhile, outside, a child could trip on those rocks. A child could trip on the curb, someone in the back said, not quite under his breath. Enough, the chairperson said, and gave the little gavel, a glorified wooden spoon, a single thud. Papers on the table fluttered in the heater's gust and settled like leaves. Silence. You can hear a whole neighborhood in a silence like that, the way people recalibrate what they think is acceptable and what is not. I took a breath. I don't want to fight, I said, and meant it. I want my family's safety and a clear line about what belongs to the association and what doesn't. The boulders are legal, they are beautiful, and they make my driveway a path for feet, not a road for cars. Jacob's knee bounced once, then stopped. The chairperson looked from the map to Linda to me. "We will hear from council next," they said at last, voice official enough to fit in a transcript. "This board will take that advice under consideration." I closed the folder with a soft snap paper saying the only thing it knows how to say, "I was here." The fluorescent lights made everyone look a shade paler, even the flag in the corner. The hearing had reconvened for spring, and the clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee someone forgot to toss. I sat with my leather folder on my lap watching the HOA's attorney thumb through my deed as if it might rearrange itself to suit the room. He paused, eyebrows lifting a notch. Paper whispered. He looked over the top of the deed at the board, then back down to the county seal as if it were answering a question he hadn't asked out loud. Behind me, a neighbor coughed. To my right, Linda tapped her heel a metronome set too fast. She rotated her Tesla key fob in her palm, making the little emblem glint like a badge. The chairperson cleared their throat. "Counsel." The attorney laid the deed flat, hands splayed like he was calming a skittish horse. "This is private property," he said, even as if reading weather. "No easement." The sentence landed with the weight of a stamp. A murmur rolled around us, not loud but wide. I watched the younger board member. She exhaled and let her shoulders sink half an inch as if she hadn't realized she'd been holding them high. Linda leaned to her microphone. "He's ignoring community safety." He held up a palm without looking at her. "I am not opining on landscaping aesthetics," he said. "I am addressing the recorded interest in this parcel." He tapped the legal description. "There is none in favor of the association." His voice stayed level, but it scraped something off the room that had been stuck there all winter. Arthur sat 3 rows back, hands folded, eyes on the documents like they were grandchildren's first report cards. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The chairperson gestured. "Please proceed." The attorney flipped a page, then another, his brow furrowing not with confusion but with confirmation. He set the deed aside and picked up a stapled packet of printed emails. Additionally, he said there is video evidence entered into the record. In it, the president of the association is seen accepting money from drivers to pass over Lot 17's driveway. He didn't look up. Collecting tolls constitutes commercial trespass. Someone sucked air between their teeth. Near the back, a man whispered, "I knew it," to the space between his shoes. Linda's heel went still. She pinched the key fob like it might steady her. People offered gas money, she said, but her voice missed a step on its way to confident. "I was alleviating congestion." "It is not the association's authority," the attorney said, "to monetize passage across a private lot." He slid the emails to the side. "Nor is there evidence that emergency access requires vehicular use of this driveway." He added, "Mild as milk parking on public streets is customary." I realized my hand had crept onto the table and flattened there, palm-full, fingers quiet. My breath came out soft enough to fog the edge of my water cup. The heater coughed once, then settled. Somewhere near the door, the metal bar thunked gently as someone came in late and regretted it. The younger board member leaned to her mic. "Counsel, to be clear, this is private property. No easement," he repeated. He could have carved it into the tabletop with a spoon. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Eleanor beside me brushed my elbow. Her eyes shone the way eyes do when the body decides it's safe to feel something. Linda regained her heel tap. "We are also concerned about children climbing those rocks," she said. "And we have received emails." "Emails are entered," the chairperson said, gentle, but finished. "We will consider them as concerns, not as law." A soft laugh escaped someone and died in their scarf. The air lightened by a fraction. The attorney gathered his papers. "I recommend the association dismiss the complaint regarding obstruction and rescind any violations issued for the boulder installation, provided the footpaths remain as designed." He glanced at my diagram, a simple nod that read like a signature. "I further recommend the association review the president's conduct regarding collection of payments for passage over a member's lot." For a heartbeat, the room was noiseless enough that I could hear the projector fan whine the low, constant breath of a machine built to make other things visible. The chairperson lifted the small gavel. The wood looked delicate, almost ornamental. "This board accepts council's recommendation," they said. The gavel touched the table with a sound that was somehow both light and decisive. Case dismissed. President Chen stepped down. The murmurs didn't build so much as tilt, like a school of fish when a shadow passes overhead. Heads turned and then turned again as if the room needed to watch itself change. Linda's face drained. She rose so fast her chair knocked against the folding table plastic, barking against metal. "This is absurd," she said, which was not a quote from any bylaw. "You're all overreacting." No one answered. You could almost smell the relief burnt coffee and paper and skin deciding to cool. Madam Chair Arthur said from the third row for the transcript, more than the drama, may we request that the record reflect the city permit survey map and the spacing diagrams remain attached to the minutes. It shall, the chairperson said, and the scribe in the corner nodded, pen already moving. The younger board member turned her microphone off and back on again as if the switch itself were clearing a path. She looked at me. Not sympathetic, not hostile, just aligned. The attorney slid the deed back across the table. I took it and felt the raised county seal against my thumb. Texture carries truth in a way ink can't. Linda stood with the key fob in her fist like a talisman that had decided to stop working. She looked around the room for purchase and found none. "You people think this makes the neighborhood safer," she said brittle. "When traffic is snarled again, don't call me." A man in the back said, "We won't," and the little ripples of laughter that followed were not unkind so much as finished. The chairperson lifted the gavel one more time. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Chairs exhaled as bodies rose. Paper rustled with that end-of-meeting sigh. Outside the clubhouse windows, the morning had warmed a degree. The hedges no longer looked like a jury. I gathered my folder. Eleanor slid her hand into the crook of my arm. Arthur joined us at the aisle, nodding once at the board like a colleague who'd seen enough hearings to know when one was done for real. "Quiet and undeniable," he said almost to himself. "Quiet and undeniable," I echoed. Behind us, the door boomed as Linda left the sound like a chapter closing in a library. The room vibrated for a beat, then steadied. I didn't watch her go. I looked at the deed, the permit, the diagram peeking from my folder, and let the weight of them settle, not heavy exactly. Just exact. Outside, the light had shifted to something kinder. The rocks at home would be catching at edges, bright shadows clean. 18 inches between each. Perfect for feet. Unnecessary for tires. Legal in every sense that mattered. Arthur knocked at dusk with a bottle of red tucked under his elbow and a grin that belonged to a man who'd just watched a bridge hold. "Time to make the rocks a garden," he said, as if we'd been paused mid-sentence for 2 years and only now remembered how it ended. The air had that clean October edge, the kind that smells like a pencil sharpened too finely, leaves brittle underfoot mums flaring along the driveway in orange and rust. The boulders caught the low sun like sleeping animals with warm backs. From down the block came the sound of kids. Someone counting, someone squealing, the hollow thud of sneakers meeting earth. Eleanor met us on the porch, hair pulled back, a smile that looked like it had been in storage and now fit again. "I bought mulch," she said, pointing at 3 tidy bags stacked by the steps, and a flat of pansies because I couldn't help it. Arthur raised the bottle. "We'll drink after. Work first, then the sermon." We set to it. I fetched my old hand trowel and a coil of twine. Arthur produced a folding tape measure like a magician palming a dove. We crouched beside the first granite shoulder and marked a curve with the twine gentle arc, low plantings, room for feet. Every time I poked the trowel in the soil, breathed damp and dark. The mum's roots clung to their packaging like polite hands. I loosened each one and felt the give of the earth accept it. A boy from 2 houses over Theo, missing one front tooth, wandered up the path and stopped with his hands jammed in his hoodie. "Is this a playground?" he asked. "It's a garden," I said, straightening up. "But gardens have paths. Try one." He tiptoed the 18-inch corridor I'd drawn years ago, arms out, stones at his shoulders like friendly guards. When he reached the mailbox, he spun, beaming, and bolted back down, feet quick and sure. "Proof of concept," Arthur murmured. Mrs. Alvarez appeared a few minutes later with a plastic container of cookies warm enough to fog its lid. She hesitated at the curb, as if the air might say yes or no. "Truce?" she asked. "Truce," Eleanor said, and took the container gently. Butter and cinnamon slipped into the evening like a truce-signing smell impossible to argue with. Mrs. Alvarez held a cookie between 2 fingers like a coin. "My sister came by last week," she said. "You walked her to the door. Thank you. Any time," I said. "The paths belong to feet." She looked at the rocks, then at me. "They look happy?" she said, half surprised by her own word. She laughed at herself and added, "If rocks can." "Some do," Arthur said. "The trick is to let them keep their dignity." Eleanor handed her a cookie. "Help us place the bench." We had found a weathered bench at the estate sale on elm iron ends with a slatted top, the kind that always looks like it remembers more than it tells. We set it on the strip between 2 granite boulders so the sitter would face the street but feel held. Arthur nudged the left leg a half inch with his shoe. "There," he said. Now it admits the idea of conversation. I laughed. Admits the idea. Benches are policy, he said. Chairs are votes. People slowed as they passed. A woman with a stroller asked if the pansies needed deadheading. An older man with a ball cap offered the name of the mulch supplier with the good stuff. A pair of teenagers pretended not to care, then circled back to test the path with the self-conscious precision of people who want to be seen, not looking. Half an hour and my phone buzzed. An email from the new HOA president subject line, tidy and calm. Invitation share landscaping design at next meeting. Eleanor read it over my shoulder, eyebrows up. Should we? Arthur answered for me. Yes. You'll give them the 3-minute version. Show the diagram the permit 2 photos, one ugly before one generous after. No gloating. Offer to help any resident create foot-safe gardens. You transform your win into a policy story. Policy? Again, I said. Better than war stories, he said. War stories make enemies. Policy makes neighbors. We spread fresh mulch that smell rich and loamy. Eleanor tucked pansies in the curve of 2 stones and brushed dirt from her knees with the back of her wrist. This, she said, is the first time I've liked this view in a long time. I always liked the concrete, I said, too dry. She nudged me with her shoulder. As the sun slid behind the houses, we worked by porch light. The bulbs cast the rocks in old movie shadows, edges, sharp centers, soft. I hammered a small cedar post into the ground near the start of the path. Arthur checked the height with his tape like a priest measuring a font. Ready, he asked. I brought out the sign I'd made in the garage wood sanded smooth letters burned in by hand with the steady patience of a man who used to measure bridges to the 1/4-inch community rock garden, S2023. I held the sign against the post. Eleanor stepped back, one eye shut like a carpenter. A little higher, she said. I raised it a hair. She nodded. Theo clapped once solemn. The screws bit clean, and the wood hummed in my palm as it grabbed. When I let go, the sign sat exactly where it wanted to be. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't named in months. Not victory, not relief, exactly. Balance, maybe. As if the ground and the paper both agreed on me for once. Neighbors gathered in that easy way people do when there's something to witness that doesn't ask much. Someone brought a thermos of cocoa. Someone else set a citronella candle on the bench like a lighthouse in miniature. We told the short version of the long story to those who hadn't heard it straight. Here's the permit. Here's the diagram. Here's the path. People nodded, adding small acknowledgments like stones to a cairn. Good call, looks nice. Kids love it about time. Nobody mentioned the winter hearing by name. The wordless part of the conversation took care of it. Arthur uncorked the wine and poured modest paper cup servings. To rocks with manners, he said. To neighbors with some Mrs. Alvarez added, and we laughed because it was safe to. When the cups were empty and the pansies watered, people peeled off toward porches, their silhouettes absorbing into doorways one by one. The night pressed its thumb gently against the edges of things. The sign glowed under the porch light in a way that made me absurdly proud, as if I'd taught wood to tell the truth. Arthur gathered the empty cups, stacking them neatly. You'll do fine at the meeting, he said. 3 minutes, 2 photos, 1 offer. I remember, I said. He touched the cedar post and then my shoulder. Quiet and undeniable, he said softly. Our old benediction promoted to a ritual. He squeezed once and headed down the walk, coat collar up against the cool. Eleanor slipped her arm through mine. Listen, she said. I did. Leaves shushed. Somewhere a dog barked twice and thought better of it. From the end of the block came the simple music of kids called inside names flung like skipping stones, the thin laugh of someone almost home. And then, just for a second, I saw a red eye flicker far down the street, the brief wink of a Tesla taillight catching and then sliding away. It turned the corner without sound, a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence, and the night took it in as if it had always been meant to go. The smoke from the grills drifted across the driveway in blue ribbons soft as a Sunday hymn. Someone flipped burgers with a sizzle that sounded like rain starting up the street and quitting halfway. The Boulders held the evening light the way old stone does, edges, warm faces glinting, and kids ran the footpaths like they'd been born knowing them. Our little sign caught the sun as it tipped lower. Community Rock Garden, Est, 2023. Across the cul-de-sac, the clubhouse wore a paper banner, a touch crooked neighborhood appreciation night. It lifted and settled with the breeze as if nodding to passers-by. Eleanor set a bowl of watermelon on the bench and brushed her hands on her jeans. It smells like we forgave each other, she said, half teasing. It smells like charcoal and diplomacy, I said. Arthur arrived with a tray of corn still in its husks and a smile that looked permanent now. Where do you want the sermon? He asked. Anywhere. There's shade, I said. I pointed to the spot between two boulders where we'd planted pansies. The flowers had thickened into small, stubborn constellations. Neighbors threaded the paths carrying salads and folding chairs clinking bottles, plastic cups nested by the dozen. Mrs. Alvarez came with her sister on her arm. I stepped forward and offered mine for the few yards from curb to bench. The corridor took us all easily 18 inches, the way a lane is a promise. "Perfect," her sister said, tapping the cedar sign with a fingernail. The new HOA president, Ethan, a software project manager who always looks a little surprised to be awake, approached with a manila envelope held like a diploma. He cleared his throat. "Graham," he said on behalf of the association. He glanced at the small circle gathering, then started again. "On behalf of your neighbors, thank you." He opened the envelope and produced cream paper with a seal embossed deep enough to shade itself. I held it by the edges just in case my thumbprint decided it had a right to linger. Letter of Appreciation. The association recognizes and appreciates the efforts of the Whitford household in enhancing community safety and aesthetics through the design and maintenance of the community rock garden. Your work has contributed to improved pedestrian use and neighborhood cohesion. I didn't read it aloud. I let the words stand between us, each line heavy with having been typed and approved and stamped. Arthur peered over my shoulder. "Undeniable," he said, pleased at the bureaucratic poetry. "Thank you," I told Ethan, "and for the invitation to speak at the meeting." He shrugged, grinning. "Policy over war stories, right?" "The landscaping committee is suddenly cool. We're starting a sign-out list for soil testers. Tell them they can borrow my tape measure," I said. He gestured at the boulders. "Also, for what it's worth, realtor at the corner told me closed sale prices ticked up this spring. Buyers keep asking about the house with the rock garden. They like that it means kids can cut through on foot, not cars." I looked down our block porches with their strings of cafe lights, stoops set like little stages, the neat mess of a neighborhood in use. "Rising tide," I said. "Without the flood," he added. From the grill, a neighbor called burgers and a small wave lifted around the yard. Tongs clinked. Ketchup caps clicked. Cicadas tuned themselves to the key of early summer, and somewhere a radio traded back and forth between classic rock and a baseball game that didn't matter to anyone but made everything sound like we were winning. Jacob, taller now and easy in his shoulders, swung by with a plate balanced on one hand. "They're asking about your diagram," he said. "I told them you kept it in a folder like the Declaration of Independence." "I'll laminate it," I said. He laughed in a clear, uncomplicated way that would have knocked me over 2 years ago and only pulled me forward now. We ate. We passed paper plates and corrected kids' ketchup trajectories and taught 2 small boys how to sit on the bench without cracking their popsicles into the mulch. A breeze came out of the east and ran a thumb across everyone's forearms. The cicadas grew a little louder. It wasn't a celebration so much as a temperature. We were all inside the same degree. Ethan tapped a spoon against his cup. 2 minutes, he said, when the noise had settled. "Graham, if you'd say a word," I stood on the first flat of the porch and felt the boards answer with a quiet, solid sound. "Thank you," I began, and my voice found its level. This started with a driveway that forgot whose it was. A few chuckles kind. We measured, we filed, we showed our work. But we also planted. And now kids use this path with permission from stone and paper both. Arthur raised his cup. Mrs. Alvarez lifted hers. Jacob put 2 fingers to his mouth and whistled, then remembered himself and turned it into a cheer. "I learned something Bridges had already told me," I said. "You can design strength, but you still have to maintain it. Tonight looks like maintenance to me." I lifted my glass lemonade tart and honest. To neighbors who chose the long way when the short way was easier, the circle answered with its scatter of voices. To the long way, to the feet, to the tape measure, to the guy who hates cars, someone called and we laughed until the laughter made us quiet again. Ethan leaned over. "We're adding a line to the bylaws clarifying driveways as private unless recorded otherwise, and a note encouraging foot-friendly landscaping along common sidewalks. You in for a draft review? I'll read it with a pencil," I said. "Of course you will," he said as if pencils were a character trait. The sun reached for the backs of the houses and found the little gaps between them. The boulders gathered whatever was left of the day and kept it on their shoulders, not stingy, not showy. A toddler toddled between 2 stones, hands skimming both, and looked up at me like I had invented a new kind of hallway. I didn't correct him. Eleanor slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head against my shoulder. "We did it," she said. "It wasn't a victory claim. It was a weather report. We stayed," I said. Arthur joined us, paper plate empty. Eyes crinkled. "Stone and paper," he said. "Who knew the romance? "You did?" I said. "Only because you reminded me," he replied, and patted the cedar post as if it were a good dog. People began to drift home the way water knows the direction of low ground. The banner over the clubhouse came loose on one corner and flapped with a sound like a polite applause. Someone jogged over and pinned it again. Cicadas held their pitch. The grills hissed themselves to sleep. I stood at the start of the path and watched Theo hop each mulch-free island to the mailbox and back. He waved, then disappeared into a square of doorway light that cut off hard when it shut. Ethan touched my elbow. "Come by Tuesday with the diagram. We'll put it in the minutes." "I will," I said. He moved on. The yard eased into that last blue color everything gets before it gives up and becomes night. The rock faces cooled under my palm. The sign, lit by the porch lamp, looked exactly like itself. I lifted what was left in my cup. The glass caught the porch light and made a small sun at my fingertips. Around me, the people who had been problem and audience and council and chorus raised what they were holding and answered back. For a second, the street felt suspended like a bridge tested and found sound. I let the quiet settle where it wanted to, then thought what I'd been carrying around for a year now blunt enough to put down out loud. Sometimes peace is built stone by stone. The night after the barbecue lingered in my senses, the faint smoke of burgers, the cool stone under my palm, and the sign that finally felt permanent. Standing among neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me, I realized our garden of rocks had grown into something sturdier than concrete trust. What began as a defense of my driveway ended as a shared landmark proof that boundaries can be honored and still invite belonging. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Share your own HOA stories in the comments below. I'd like to hear them.